Hey people, I want to start this with this memory from 4 years ago I posted on Facebook. And this is an old book of poetry that was blacklisted for a long time. And I just caught a couple of codes that he had hidden in here. And the reason I talk about it is because when he started, in his preface, that's what he writes about. It's been a long complaint of the virtuous and refined world that poesy, whose origin is divine, should be enslaved to vice and profaneness. And he goes on through this previous couple of pages here to let you know that it was our age of national Christians that have to their eternal shame surpassed the vilest of the Gentiles in disrobing the religion of all ornaments and verse, taking the verse out of the book. But what I caught here was in the names and in this Latin here. It's poems of the chiefly of the lyric kind. The lyric, is the words in 3 sacred books. And so the word sacred has kind of been twisted. And if you put the SH in place of this, the shack, give you a better idea where that word comes from. Shackard is to sleeps with, to devotion, piety, virtue, and honor, and friendship, and to the memory of the dead. And by I Watts, D.D. is the way people will read that. But the way the poet wrote this, this is by I what it is, what tits. This would be spelled W-A-T-X, what it is, did. And by I what it is, did, what has done, And so this did is spelled a little different. It's spelled with the dot, the period is the ought. And ought means the smallest part of iota. It's just the little bitty dot on top of the I. Did would be spelt with the D-I-D. It means through yod, through the hand. And what he's saying with this is just the smallest part of the hand, just a finger, a digit. By what is pointed out, the digit, the did, by what is did, the D and the smallest part of the hand did. And it's by what I had already done, by what's did is where that come from, And then this Latin is tiny, it's hard to see. I pulled it off. And I put it in translator. And I don't like their translation at all. If you just put a space here, the C becomes yes, C. And it actually comes from the Z-E in the Hebrew, which means is, and is not. And so it's asking a question, is not Urani? And so that's Uranus, which was the old Greek word for heaven, in a joking way, is not Urani, the lyrum, the words of Colosseum, of the celestial, which is, sometimes given the meaning heaven, but we know what the celestial means. It's the spheres. It's where your word, the calendar's coming from, and it's the call, and ism is them. The call is from, to call these from. And you can see this ism right here, that's the same as the Hebrew heaven. The Esam, and what it means is the same, as above is so below, the name of the heavens or the name of the earths. Is not Urani, is not the heaven the lyrics call is from to cohabit. And so they'll say this is the celestial lyre, but the lyre is the instrument to play the music, the guitar, but the lyrum is the words. And so is not the heavens the words of the celestials, and to co-bibit. And they just totally left that out of there. You don't see it here. You have to put a space in here. And then they'll try to give it a meaning. Oh, we'll sleep. And it doesn't mean sleep. It means co. It means together hibit, together inhabit. We'll sleep together. And so is not the heavens and the words of the celestials together habit? Are they not the same? and nor polyhymnia. And you see that's poly, and then ey, they many, and that's many many. Poly they many is many many, but the name is spelled different in the old Greek. And she was the god of the muses. Sacred poetry, sacred hymn dance. And you see it's spelled with the POLU, which is the poly, and then many, MNIA, the many many. The muses, EM, them muse of sacred poetry. And then this the human, is who man them, refuge it. Refuge it is to hide it. As in refugee, coming from the refugium. Now meant the act of taking refuge, or place of refuge, asylum, a place of protection. From the Latin root can mean to shelter or sanctuary. Or from the verb to run away or escape. Not repel, but to hide it. The tender baritone. Baritone is a low note, a low vibration. And if we split these up, we see the different translations come out of it. It's not urani, the words of heaven cohibit together, nor the many hymenum humanum, to hide it, the tender of baritone, the low note. And then when I looked at the signature, this is said to be Horus shortened, but it looks more like the hours. The Horus was the hours, where the sun's sitting in heaven. The hours had I, imitate. And so, the I, the Jimmy, that's what they give time or the day in the Hebrew, and the hour had I, and tat, T, T is the writings at, and the hour had I, the day, itat. And so this is, the imitat is what you wrote for that day, and the hour is where the heavens were, where the planets were in the heavens. That's the time in the heavens and what you had did on that day, and imitate. Emit is to make with, IMIT, mit is with, to make with that. In the hours had I make with that. Keeping book of what's going on in the heavens and on earth. So this written in 1880, and the writer's skilled in many languages. You'll see some quotes out of Hebrew and Greek, and some poems in Latin in here. And I call it, it's the transition between the Middle and Modern English. And so, at the beginning is the preface, and the P and the F were the same letter, and it's to prepare you, to prep, to prep for, to get you ready for what's in the writings, to prep, the preface. And so just before this, they were writing of, was just a L or a O, and a the was just the E here, and the and, was just the vav. And it shows the difference in how people were reading words. It has been a long complaint, and a complaint comes from, accomplice, and ain't, A-I-N-T. They say ain't a word, but it is a word. It's an ancient Hebrew word, and it means I ain't gonna, not, and ain't, I'm not an accomplice. It's been a long accomplice not of ever to, of ever to whose where if end world. With ever to is where in world, where if in world, spun, and the world was spinning, they knew it. And some people were reading this, that were refined, they were reading the vav at the beginning is and refined instead of where if in world. That posy, posy is the short quick lyrics that you could put in a ring, a little message that could be written in a ring. So what some people are seeing is the complaint of virtuous and refined world that posy, as some people are seeing is a complaint. I'm not going along with of ever to whose where if in spun the posy and spun the rhyme, the quote. The writers, the ones who spin in these quotes. The refined world is those whose where if in, where if in id, where if in had, turn the words, turn them rhymes. And if you read on through, it's a pretty big preface, and that's what he goes on to say is they have done twisted the verse. So that's why he was blacklisted. Who's its original? Original comes from the origin of all. All is the God. The origin of God. It was created. It should be enslaved to vice. The origin of is divine, come from God, where the poetry come from the heavens. Should be enslaved to vice and profaneness. And then an art inspired from heaven should have. And you see this word from heaven, this is a M, to me have in. To me have in. And this is the Hebrew word for heaven here, the shoal. The shoal is the heaven, and they use it both ways. Sometimes they say it's heaven, sometimes they say it's hell, the shoal. And me having shoal, me having heaven through, have so far lost the memory of its birthplace. The birthplace is the origin of. And so I had started making another movie. I'm just adding this on the front. And it was before while I was reading that last movie in Exodus. In that last movie I was reading in Birth of Moses. I got down to line 8. In past couple movies I showed you that, the spelling of Moses in the Hebrew Bible looks more like this family of these Moses here that are coming from La, the moon. And so this was the mother of Moses. This was her seal. And they read this as Ahotep. And I'm not too sure about that. But this word La and Ohadi, that's the words that they use in the Hebrew for the mother of Moses. And so this is the mother of all the Moses family. You see they call it the issue. That's the same word that's in the Hebrew. And her father was also Amos. That's the Moses family. And you see in his seal here, this is the Amos. In a couple movies I was showing you where it called out this symbol somewhere in this chapter here. And they'll tell you that that's just another way of writing that the moon is born, is Amos. Sometimes written as a Moses. And it's at the right time in the 18th dynasty when they say they were running the Hyksos out of Egypt. In all the records in Egypt, this is the closest thing they could figure out to being what they call Hebrews. And you see he's got that same symbol here, the little I in the boat, and the Mos. And that's what this actually says. This is the first time that this word's used. And it's coming with this OU over here, Mos. And became her son, La, the moon. But it appears in this Hebrew Bible that it's Ahodi that was the real mother. Ahodi. And as I was reading in this yesterday, it looked like, that was her decision, was to have her sister carry the baby. And if you look at this P as a F, it's a Hotef. You make this a final V instead of a U or a W, a hot of. So while I was making that movie yesterday, I try to just read through and ignore all the markings except the tags. And I caught myself sometimes so used to reading the top row of markings first. I had to piece it together where I confused it some. But that's the reason they write like this. That's why these words and these names are all split up like this. It means many different things. But I caught something in this word here that better defines and said. When you just read with no marks, it's what wretch to all. What wretch to all. His sister was a hoe, And when you read it with the top markings, it looks like it's just somebody English trying to make it more proper English. It's what to them, the wretch, the wretched of. What to him, the wretched of. His sister was the wretch, the wretched of. And when you read the lower markings, it's the same, just a little more proper. The WOT is what. and what to, and mur, mur is a high place. What to high, a ket of. What to more, what to high, the more you got, the higher it is. And what to more, a ket of. A ket is the flood season. That's what it was talking about. What to more, a ket of. But when you read it with the mark in here that has you read it the other direction, it's what, and then backwards, what to, and then RMOAT, what to remote. And that's what words do. They're to remote, to send information, to remote control, and what to remote them, the wretched, and what said the wretched to. And in the last word in this line, the yield, it's going to change it up. It's going to read a couple different ways, and it's going to let on a big old clue to who the Hebrew that she may nurse for you, the child. Without any of the markings, it's the ovary it, what in. The ovary it, what in FLK, the flict the yield. The ovary is what inflict the yield. So that means if they're looking for a nurse, they knew it was a Hebrew child, and they want to get the same type of ovary that what inflicted the yield. And when you read it with this tack here, it's inflicted. It's what inflicted and lie the yield, that lie the child. And so, the child are the crops, the yield, and it's talking about the flood, what brings in the soil, to inflict the yield. And so I was saying, that what tammer, tammer is when you're tapping on something, trying to shape something, or when you keep on asking something, you're tammering. Oh, mama, can I, please, you're tammering. But when you're reading it with the lower markings, that's what to remote. What to remote from a high place, a more. What to remote a more. So this Ak 2 over here going to give us a better idea of why they named the inundation season. And you see that's what it's got. This is the CH, the chet, in all ancient language, the chet. And that's what it has in common in all, most, in the T here, in the A here. And so that's the inundation season, it's the flood season. And so if you read it with the lower markings, and it's what to remote, to a distance away from, a more, a high place, or a remote, or to remote them, to remote them from a distance them of ratchet to, of cling to go to a high grounds, a more high, a more ratchet to, escape from the flood waters, to move up, and all to better, all to better, backwards and forwards, to better parole, to better, and P-R-O-E is O-L-E, and to better parole, to get out. The all, the Al-Khafra, that's the Al-Khafra, that's the Great Pyramid, Khafra, the Al-Khafra-Tilic, the all-cover till, and then the K, reading over here, the K-A-S, and then the other way in the A-E is E-S, the all-cover till cases, and then S-E-M, to cases them in fit. They all cover in cases them in fit. The men, and then come back and read the M again with this mark. The men me over it, what in. The men me over it, what in. The ones I'm in charge of. To better parole, to better get out. The all cover till the cases them in, before they get closed in. The cases them in fit. The men me over it would in. The NQ reads twice, and the men me over it what enough, INFN, what enough in flick. And then grab the L again, the late, what enough inflict late, the lie, the yield, what was late, what didn't get out in time, and Delilah, the lie, the yield. Then on this next line, on this Tamara, you see the markings look different underneath here. So you're reading the top, and it's what to a moral, a habit. But if you read it with just the directional markings underneath here, there's several of them that add words. It's to what to moral, and backwards and forwards, what to moral. And then the line says, grab this again, L-E-V, to leave it. And what to moral, leave it. The whore, backwards, the whore, parole, P-R-O-L-E, the O-E is O-L-E, and the whore, parole, and then frolicky, what like, hold me, what offer, what for at, mom, backwards and forwards, M-A-M, and then the A-M again, mama, and what offer it, what for at mama me yield, and give mama the child, the whore, parole. And I believe that's going with the line where it's talking about the who fuck it habitually, the ones that spitting out kids and abandon them and burn the mother is what it's saying. What cried, what whammer, let's leave it. Leave it there, let's leave it. And you see in this word here, when you're reading the lower vowel points, it's what to fire, F-I-R-A, what to fire at them, the yield. To have of all issue, the underneath here, this is the A point, A-E is E-S, issue, the children, to fire at them. And you can see here, when you was just reading the letters, just the W-T and F-R-A-A-T-O-O-T, what fruitum the yield. Hold me, what fruitum the yield. Mama hold the baby. So this is where I had left off in that last movie. And I was just reading the letters. I was ignoring all the points. And it's what to moral have it, whore, parole. A whore, parole is, the whore gets out to parole. And what to moral have it, whore, parole. They likey at the lie they yield. These to they nephew, And so, that's where your word nephew come from. That's probably who you're nursing. If it's not your yield, it's probably your nephew. But it probably has something to do with when you're screwing your wife's sister, Your child is your wife's nephew. And to they nephewly, the nephew, like, be nephewly and nurse him for me. Nurse him for me. And to they nephewly. And any at in at cracks crack. To any it in backward, the cracks, and then again crack. The cracks crack. What fuck? What fuck has she? The yield. What nephew? What fuck has she? The yield. What nephew? You're screwing your brother, and her fuck will yield a nephew. So I turned on the news this morning, and they said the Queen was sick, and she died throughout the day. But they had showed a picture of her that had struck me, and I was seeing a resemblance with Osmosis here. And some of the stories about him show better than the pictures. But he had a big overbite. I think he had some rabbit teeth up there, maybe. And there's a strange story, where they found him in the wrong tomb, like he'd been moved. So I imagine they had time to do the ceremony and stuff her soul into a new baby heir, a new Abiba. And I'm not running to that picture I was saying. So I'm going to cut this off here. Good day.